would like to welcome and present Marie-Pierre Trebier from the University Laval in Canada. She will be presenting the paper on impact of setpoint control on indoor greenhouse climate modeling.
Hi, everyone. Like he said, I'm going to present the impact of setpoint control on indoor greenhouse climate modeling. My name is Marie-Pierre Trépanier, and I was supervised by my professor Louis Gosselin from the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Université Laval in Canada. For a brief presentation outline, I will start by introducing you to my subject. For the methodology, I will present the model selection and simulation approach, and I will also explain how I analyze my data with sensitivity analysis. Then I will show the results in the discussion. I will put an emphasis on energy consumption contribution, and I will also present to you the limitation of the model I used, and will conclude. So by 2050, the world's population is approximately going to reach 9.7 billion people. This means that it will have a major increase by at least 50% of the food production. Having an increase in food production means also an increase in energy consumption and an increase in carbon footprint and environmental degradation. Also, we will lack the number of fields to produce food, and also in certain parts of the world, it's not possible to produce food year-round or just produce food at all. So greenhouse farming is a key solution to this challenge. With greenhouse farming, there is climate control. Climate control is a main part, and it will really influence the performance of the greenhouse. There's different algorithms that can be used to control greenhouses. Some are really simple. Manual growers will turn on and off different components, and we also have really intelligent algorithm. Each algorithm will use different components. So in a greenhouse, we'll have the heating system, the ventilation, CO2 injection, and different components. And each of these components will be set by different parameters, like the temperature, the relative humidity, and more. The primary focus of this research is really to determine which control parameters have the most significant impact on greenhouse performances, especially in energy consumption and yield. Greenhouses, it's really important to consider the yield because sometimes it's advantageous to consume more energy if we are able to produce more food. Also, another focus was to target the controls that would gain to be set dynamically, ensuring optimal real-time adaptation to external conditions. So the objective is really to find which parameters have the most influence, and then after we can go into greenhouses and see growers and tell them like it's important to have good sensors and good data acquisition for these specific controls to be able to have better control of the overall greenhouse. For the methodology, there's two main parts. The first part will be more about the model and simulation. So I'll explain to you which type of greenhouses was used for the simulation and the climate control that was used. And after, I'll also explain the sensitivity analysis, the method used, and the regression. For the model selection and simulation approach, the reference greenhouse is a greenhouse in the region of Montreal, Quebec. In Quebec, in Montreal is where there is a bigger market and better temperature, so this is where most of the greenhouses are. It's a Venlo type greenhouse with glass covers, and the tomato crop used is tomato. The crop uses tomato, and this is the crop that is the most produced in Quebec and even all around the world. The model used is the Greenlight model. The Greenlight model is actually an open source model that has been coded in MATLAB, and it simulates an advanced greenhouse that is illuminated. So we have HPS and LED lighting. We see in the graph here that there is like 5 main components of the model: the outdoor weather, the indoor climate, the crop, the output, and the controls. They're all related to one another, and as we can see, the control really has an impact on all the parts of the greenhouse. For the reference climate controls, so there's different components that are controlled in the simulation I did. We have the lamps, the blackout screens, the thermal screens, the CO2 injection, the heating, and the cooling by ventilation. And each of these components are controlled by different parameters, different set points. We mainly have the global solar radiation, the air temperature, the relative humidity, and the CO2 concentration. So for example, for the lamps, we have a set point for global solar radiation and for air temperature. So if we do not attain our solar radiation, but the greenhouse is, for example, too warm, the lamps will not turn on. For the sensitivity analysis, the objective was really to identify which input parameters have the most significant impact on the output variables, allowing for a better understanding of their relationship. We did two different analyses, one with HPS supplemental lighting, which most of greenhouses still have, and one with LED supplemental lighting, which is the future of lighting in greenhouses. For the input values, we chose 8 different control set point that we change with a range that is wider than the proposed optimal values for crop grown. So we wanted to see, yes, in the literature, it says the temperature needs to be, for example, around 18 and 25, but what if we go a bit further than that? What is the impact on the overall greenhouse? For the sampling method, I use a latent hypercube sampling. So it's a pseudo-random samples that it mimics a random structure. And the advantage of that compared to a random structure is that I need a smaller sample to have the same effect. Usually we use 10 times the number of input variables. So in this case, to cover all the range, I use 80 simulations. For the regression method, I use a linear regression, a standard regression coefficients. And this is a good way of analyzing the data, but I have to make sure that the data has linearity of the outputs and that the inputs are not correlated. So that was tested before presenting the results. And also all the coefficients presented are standardized to be able to better compare them to one another. So here are the results of the standardized regression coefficient of each variable. So we have the HPS lighting and the LED lighting, and we have the two outputs I talked before, so the energy and the yield. And we really see for the energy that the main impact is relative humidity, so the blue line. And for total yield, the main one is the air temperature during the light period. So the light period is when the plants see light. So it's not necessarily the day, because if the lights are on during the night, this is considered the light period. We also have other impacts from other variables, but as we can see, they're not as major as the relative humidity and the temperature. Here is an example with the function of the sensitivity analysis input variables for 350 days under HPS lighting. We use 350 days, which is what is usually used in greenhouses in Canada, because they use 2 weeks to change the harvest and clean the greenhouse. And this allows them to have management of their greenhouse over a year, which is easier for them. So we see that the total fresh weight of tomato yield is impacted. In blue is what we would like to have. So we want higher yields, and we have higher yield in lower temperature. And for the relative humidity, for the total energy, when we want to have to consume less energy, when we have higher relative humidity set point. So if we want lower humidity in our greenhouse, we will consume more. To implement a predictive control strategy, it is essential to have accurate measurements and predictions. And we saw that it's important to have good temperature and humidity to be able to optimize the condition of the indoor greenhouse settings. Also, reliable prediction allow the control algorithm to anticipate environmental changes and to adjust control action accordingly. Accurate prediction of temperature and humidity is challenging also because it's complex and they're all related. All parameters are related to one another in a greenhouse. Here I wanted to talk a bit more about the energy consumption. So I will focus on the different relative humidity set points. So we see that for the consumption, for the lighting consumption, which is the blue line, will always be the same. It's not dependable of the relative humidity. However, when we have higher relative humidity, we will consume less energy, especially during winter, which is about 75 to 125 days. And this is due to when we want lower humidity in our greenhouse, one of the ways to achieve that is to open the windows to get the humidity out. But if we're during winter and we open the windows, then we have to heat way more our greenhouse. So it's not advantageous. But in a certain way, we cannot go over a certain amount of humidity because it's not good for the plants. But we still want to maximize the higher humidity we are able to have. For the limitation of the model, the precision of the research is directly tied to the model's accuracy. So any limitation in the green light model can be shown in this research. Also, the model has a limited set of humidity and temperature values. It's not like a CFD analysis, so we do have different temperature at different heights, but we don't have a map of the greenhouse if there's like certain points that could be more important. Also, I think it would be really interesting to compare the model's prediction to real world data under different control conditions. So to have a part of a greenhouse that we can change the control and really see how it affects the plants. For the impact of Setpoint control on indoor greenhouse climate modeling, I would say that the most important thing to remember, and this was validated with literature also, is that relative humidity and air temperature during the light period are the main factors that we really need to have good sensors and good data acquisition if we want to have good models after. For the limitation, it's really the accuracy and realism depends on the model. And to further understand and optimize the greenhouse performances, I think it would be really interesting to implement a digital twin and adopt a more dynamic variable control. Thank you.
So now for the questions. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yeah.
I don't know if I just can speak up. Oh, okay. It's because we are recording, so if you would use. Thank you for a very, very interesting presentation. And I fully agree that a digital twin will be nice. Can you elaborate a little bit more on which type of digital twin you are aiming at? I know this is probably future work, but how do you ensure that you are able to assimilate information from sensors into the model parameters for model predictive control and things like that? Because I think if you have a full-blown digital twin, it will be difficult.
Yeah, it will be hard. I think the first step we would, like in our project, the digital twin comes like later. The first step will really have to have a good greenhouse with our partnerships that have good sensors and start by analyzing this sensor and also the results of the greenhouse and the electricity bills to see if it makes sense with what we have. So this would kind of be our first step. And after, I think we would kind of start by focusing on temperature and humidity before having like a complete control digital twin, because this would be a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree. The coupling between temperature and humidity is extremely important for greenhouse. But maybe we can have a chat in a break later. Thanks.
So any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you for a nice presentation. You talked primarily about the yield of the tomatoes. Are there any concerns regarding like the qualitative aspects of tomatoes? So I don't know too much about tomatoes, but maybe like yield is not the only like parameter to look at?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Quality is like hard to define. A lot of people have like different standards. Like some will be the sugar in the fruit, some will be like the color. It's like kind of hard to put into simulation, and this is why we focused on yield. The yield we focused on actually is like really the like we take the dry matter of the fruit and then we multiply it by a coefficient of water that is supposed to be in the fruit to have like the kilogram of fresh fruit we are supposed to get at the end. It would be interesting to take quality into consideration, but I think it's kind of hard because I talked at least to a few growers and a few people in the field, and they all say different things about quality. So it's kind of hard to put into a simulation.
Thank you.
So I think we have time for one more question, if there should be any. No. So then I would like to thank Marie. And yeah. Here you go.